Good afternoon and welcome to the June 8th meeting of the Litchfield School District Facilities Improvement Committee. As chair of the school board, I will call the meeting to order and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And with that, I will turn the reins over to Superintendent Jetty.
Sure. So we've got a couple of topics on our agenda today. We want to start by going through the GMS project, specifically take a deeper dive into the architect fees, discuss school funding updates on where we are with state building aid, and also an update on where we are with land acquisition. Then we'll shift over to LMS to talk about the phasing information that we've received from them, and also the CHS Lighting project. So that's under project updates from the other two schools. We'll then have a chance for member input, and we'll adjourn no later than 5:30 tonight. So that makes sense for everybody. So I think we come back to GMS project and the architect's fees. So Kyle is here to talk with us about the next phase of fees, because now we're into schematic design. We're into getting stuff pulled together for the state building aid application, which is pretty substantial. And so I wanted Kyle to walk us through exactly where we are with fees. There have been some questions in the community about how much this is costing us and so forth. And I thought presenting it in depth here to the facilities committee made the most sense. So Kyle?
Great. So I think to talk about where we're at currently, I kind of want to take a broader picture of the whole fee and the structure and show you, what this is all about. I hear a lot of talk about, we bought blueprints. Well, and that's not exactly what you get when you hire an architect. So at talking with Michael, it seemed like a good idea to do a little show and tell today. So I brought a couple of sets of drawings. I brought with me the Highbridge Hill Elementary School. I'm sorry it's on the small format. What I realized is a year or two ago, I purged my archives and got rid of the big tree trunks of drawings out of my attic. So I reprinted this and didn't have the heart to do it on full size. But this is a school that's similar size, 75,000 square feet. It was built about 10 years ago. Same student population, maybe a little bit smaller. So very similar building in terms of size and scope, not quite as sophisticated in terms of the systems because it was 10 years ago and codes were different. There's a few things that are different, but I think from a standpoint of level of effort, you'll be able to see what it takes to actually produce an architectural set of drawings. Now, the drawings themselves are split up into different disciplines. You've got architectural, structural, mechanical, plumbing, electrical, and then there's other subs that the owner provides, and outside of that, such as furniture, fixtures, equipment, that are also part of the work that aren't necessarily in these drawings. There's another package of designs that go along with that. But you'll see that it's pretty exhaustive in terms of the different disciplines and the number of sheets. I believe there's about 50 architectural drawings, and there's at least another 50 in the engineering. So we're well over 100 drawings in this set. I expect the new GMS set of drawings will probably approach 150 drawings. So that's a fair amount. I brought this other set of drawings because if this is at half size, this is the current job I've got going on, which is only $1 million project, but you can still see it's a thick set of drawings. It's not a small set. It still has all the different components of a larger project, just not as many. So there's still a level of effort to get through on something even as small as $1 million, which is 1/30th what we're projecting for this one. So I'm going to actually pass this around, let people take a look at it while we talk some more about what this is about.
No idea what I'm looking at, but I will do my best.
All I'm really looking for is for you to understand that I understand what goes into a building.
I understand that already.
Kyle, if I may, I think that's a point that I'd like to make, is that some people look at the product as the picture, right? But to produce a picture, I mean, you have to know and understand the code, know and understand all sorts of aspects, and consult with a variety of people. So
yes,
it's not just the final product, it's the knowledge base to produce the final product, which is something that I certainly couldn't do. We have to hire a professional architect in order to produce that volume of work. And so it's really important. I think everybody understand that that's what goes
Yeah.
into this. It's like, I have knowledge of the law, Heidi, but I'm not going to go to court and
Right.
present a case because I don't understand the rules of a court and how to do that, right? You hire an attorney to do that work and so forth.
Well, in fact, people think that we sell drawings, and we don't. Our product is not the drawings. Our product is the ideas that are contained in those drawings. The drawings are just a method of conveying those ideas in order to build a building. So, yes, we need, a lot of experience, a lot of trials and errors, and a lot of, knowledge and know-how in order to get to that point. But when you look at the copyright laws, the drawings are really only paper. That who owns the designs is still the architect, because you can't alienate the architect from the ideas that are in those drawings. So what's important about that is that conveying the ideas is not just about producing the drawings and then having somebody go by the drawings. Now, obviously, the drawings have to be in an intense detail for the contractor to understand everything that's going on. And in fact, what I didn't bring, because I purged it again, is the spec book, which is another 500 and something pages of fairly dense technical writing that talks about the types of nails, the sizes of the nails, the material in the nails, the types of glue, the color of the sealants. I mean, everything is spelled out in the specs. And again, it's well over 500 pages, about that thick. For the hybrid shell, I had to do it in 2 pieces because the binders kept breaking. So there's a lot of work that goes into the drawings and the specifications. But that's still only about half of our work. The other half comes in 2 pieces. The first half is before the drawings are completed. We go through the schematic design. That's where we're at right now. And so the schematic design is really only, the product is only a few pages of this size that are the pretty pictures, basically, the colored plans, the colored renderings, colored elevations. But what you don't understand is that behind that is that we've designed that building multiple times before you even see those pages. That the process of design is sort of a spiral. It's not linear. It goes from we have some thoughts, we commit it to paper. We then take that paper and open it up for criticism. And multiple people within our team look at that and make comments about what's good and what's bad. We challenge the ideas that were put on the paper. And then we go back and we reconcile those challenges and come up with a new design that's hopefully better than the first one. And then we put that open for criticism, and we do it all again. And then we do it again until finally the plan is something that we feel good about and present to the client, which at that point, you have comments. You want to make some changes. There's more information that comes out. We go back, redraw it, open it up for criticism, do the whole process again. So by the time we get through to, say, the bond vote, that plan has gone through multiple changes and a lot of effort to try to fine tune it. The way I try to explain the process, it's kind of like, in a very simplified terms, it's like using a telescope to look at a distant object. You start out way back and you look and there's a blurry figure, and then you want to zoom in on it. So you start zooming. And as you focus, the blurry image becomes more clear, but then you go a little bit too far and you have to go back a little bit, and you go too far and you come back again. It's back and forth until the image becomes more and more clear to the point where you feel like you're seeing the best picture. That's a lot like what design is all about. It's not linear. It's more of a spiral. So that's the beginning phases of the design, where we come up with a schematic design. And then once that is complete, we start to develop those schematics and into the product that you see in front of you. But our job doesn't end there either. We still have to deliver the construction. And so we use the drawings and the specifications. We don't just hand them over to the construction manager and hope for the best. We work with them on a daily basis. I will be on site every week checking and reviewing the progress of the work and making sure that what they're doing meets the intent of the construction documents. We will be reviewing shop drawings and submittals, product information, requests for information. I'm not perfect in the work that I do, and I recognize that, and I look for mistakes and try to correct them before they become problems. But sometimes problems sneak into the drawings, and we get to the field and we realize, oh no, this wall really needs to be over here. And so it's our job to make sure that, once we identify those, that we come up with a correction, and do that as quickly and best as we can. And that also the contractor is not necessarily perfect. There's a lot of pieces. There's a million parts to this building. And so it's likely that something's going to get put in the wrong place. And then I have to go take a look at it, see what's going on, figure out a corrective measure, and come up with the best resolution to that. And so I'm not just there to oversee the contractor. I'm there to help, that the contractor, the construction manager, and the architect work together with the owner to make sure that all those pieces of parts, and there are many, and there's many people that have oversight to it and need reviews. Once a piece of brick is put into place, multiple people have looked at that product to make sure it's the right one before it goes in. So there's a lot of checks and balances throughout the process, but it takes time. It takes a lot of effort on my part. Like I said, I'll be driving down here every week, a lot of time and effort on my team, who will be reviewing all the paperwork, producing sketches, producing memos, adding information, responding to requests for information. There's a ton of paperwork and time and effort that goes into just delivering the construction. Ultimately, the final act is to put together a certificate of final substantial completion. So once the building is complete and the construction manager is ready to hand over the key, I'll do an inspection to make sure that everything that they promised to do is done. There's probably a list that comes out of that of a few things, paint that was chipped, a ceiling tile that was broken. That punch list then becomes part of the documentation, and they're required to make those final corrections before the job is considered done. And even after that, there's the warranty period for the construction manager. If anything is found to be wrong, that they come in and check on it. And I'm certainly a phone call away if there's problems that arise during that period as well. So as you can see, that it's, again, I'm responding to what Michael had said about there's been comments about, owning the blueprints and what that takes. And it's not an accurate description of what an architect really does. That an architect doesn't sell drawings, we sell ideas, and we work hard to implement those so you can get the final product, the building that we're working on designing. How is that? Does that helpful? Does it make sense? Does it give you a little more insight as to what an architect goes through?
I think it is helpful. And I think the other piece is, the question we've heard from the community is that there were schematic diagrams presented for the last school, but it wasn't this. It wasn't a set of comprehensive plans to this level of detail. It really was just a schematic of the way the classrooms were laid out. So,
and I also think it's important too, because I've heard a lot of those comments that those drawings were based on a school with a different student population, as well as those were drawings that were done based on being on the current site.
They were actually up on the hill at the middle school.
Okay.
And there were future codes,
Correct.
past codes. So,
Right.
I mean, everything's changed since then.
Yeah, and I think we looked at it, Michelle, and am I correct? It was designed for 1,100 students. At the core was at 1,100 students. So it would have been way oversized by where we currently are. And it just didn't get beyond that general schematic. So,
And the least important, it was not in line with the philosophical approach that we're going with either. It was not designed as what you'd say is an ideal elementary school that fosters collaboration.
So we are in the process of, Michelle did a lot of work over the last couple of days, going back through the archives to figure out how much we paid to get that, because that was another question that had been asked, and it was actually a substantial amount of money. We've added up. We're not ready to give you a final number yet, but it was not inexpensive because it was like a 5-year effort, right?
Mm.
So 5 years of
So many
redrawing.
plans and study. He actually went through and did a field study on GMS with a team, and we got a copy of his field notes and the recommendations out of that. And then he did a renovation study with his contractor. Now he owns the contractor, so they billed us under a different name. So I'm going through I found the old bookkeeping records that we had, and I'm going through those trying to pinpoint everything. But he did do a lot, but not to the in-depth, of getting every room,
Right.
showing you every floor and every room. It was just schematic, but he went through a lot of renditions too. It would change constantly with the space needs, and the space allocation workbooks changed constantly.
Right.
So there was a lot of paperwork.
And in fairness to taxpayers who are curious, a lot of it was report production. So,
Mhm.
Deficiencies at the GMS site were identified through the reports.
Right.
We've turned all that over to Kyle. That wasn't wasted money,
No.
because Kyle was able to say, oh, well, look, here's some information that's
Right.
already been collected, right? So it's not as if that went nowhere. The plans
it was
didn't get
valuable
supported,
information. Yeah.
right? But there's still some of that material that was useful and helpful to us in this process. So,
Yeah.
Thanks, Kyle. That's a good
Not a problem.
intro.
I think another important piece too that relates to this, I know it came up in our budget committee meeting last time, and I tried my best to speak to it, is when we look at the overall architecture fees, I think there was perhaps some misconceptions around that amount being paid prior to any town vote approving a project like this. And so we tried to get in front of that a little bit, but I think anything that you all could add to better clarify that might be good for people to understand.
Well, so what we're proposing to work on is that first phase, the schematic design phase. And so we've tagged that at 20% of the total fee. So you can look at the total fee and take 20% of that. That's what we're going to do between now, or we've been doing for the past couple of months, and what we will continue to do up through the end of the year and in preparation for March town meeting. So I don't have I do have the numbers here someplace, but I think that's been given to the superintendent, and so we have a fixed fee that we'll be working on, which is 20% of the total fee between now and the end of the year. And that will get you the schematic designs, which is again colored plans, renderings, again all that background back and forth nature, and a little bit further in terms of the detail, because we want to have something that's detailed enough for the construction manager to put a guaranteed maximum price. Now they've just been hired. We haven't started working with them yet, but we will be working with them very closely over the next few months, so that we understand what they need, and that we're providing that, and vice versa, that we understand what the methods of construction are currently that are the most cost effective.
That's helpful, because I think when you combine the number you're referring to, along with, I believe 2 weeks ago, you talked about the civil fee would probably be included in that. Then that represents the number that was shared at the budget committee meeting a couple of weeks ago.
Okay. Yeah.
In that ballpark.
The civil engineering, I mean, not really free to talk about them yet, because it needs to be focused on a site. But my view is that we need to ask them to go a little even further than schematic design. The reason being is that there's two reasons. The first is that the site is the most difficult part of the project to estimate for construction. And so without detailed designs, the construction manager doesn't know how much to tag for the cost. So they need to be a little bit further along just for that. But besides that, the permitting process for civil design takes a long time. So if we're a little bit further with the civil engineering, it makes the lead time before we can start construction shorter. So, you can't just take the civil engineering fee and multiply that by 20%. It's going to be more like 60%.
Now, don't you also have to bring on a structural and an MEP early on to come up with a narrative?
Yeah, that's part of our
Yeah.
that's built into our fee
So
already.
you guys are actually subbing out your substructural, your MEP, your fire alarm
So
to be part of that whole process.
that's a good point. Thank you for reminding me. Is that it's not just me. There's a whole army behind me. We've got Suzanne up on the screen and Nicole. They're the two that are kind of running it from the New York office. But in that office is several other people. You got Calvin, you've got project managers and designers that are going to be doing the drafting work. But also, yes, we have a structural engineer, Ken Marshall from Foley, Buell and Roberts. He'll have a drafter working on this as well behind him, if not two. Then we've got WV Engineering out of Keene doing the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection. He's got Charlie Herr, Sean Taft, office people that are going to be helping him out. And then besides that, we've got a whole slew of other smaller contractors. Mike Marvin, I think is the guy's name, who's going to be doing the energy modeling. We've got potentially food surface designers and things of that nature. Now, some of those won't come into play until we're well into the construction drawings. But we're already engaging with the energy modeling now in order to make sure that our early designs are meeting our requirements for net zero energy. So yes, there's a whole slew, a whole army of people that are working on this.
You need all those just to get to the narrative, to get to the GMP for the construction manager.
Absolutely. And when you think about when you look at the time that goes into a set of drawings like that, one person can't produce that. And if they did, it would take 10 years. So if we want to do it in 10 months, we need 10 people working on it at the same time in order to get through it. So thanks for that question.
I was just trying to help point out that
Yeah.
it's more than just your fee. There's a lot of other fees that go into it that are rolling up into your fee,
Absolutely.
just to get to the schematic design
Yeah.
process.
It's a machine. It's a machine behind the works.
Other questions or points for Kyle? So we've worked with Kyle. Dave Ely's been involved as the owner rep on trying to look at the overall fee, get the contract. So we've got a draft contract that is, I think, probably ready to come forward to the board next Wednesday. I think we can get it there. And so
A little more edit for the energy, the solar stuff. I got to put in there. I think we're done.
But what I'm impressed by is that it's sort of it's an all-in approach, right? So Kyle is so comprehensive at covering all the aspects of this budgetarily and so forth that I feel very confident that we've got a number that the board can feel comfortable with, and that will cover everything relative to this building. So, and then we know that 20%, I think, is the amount that is due before the March vote, and that will cover the Kyle's expenses to get to that March vote with the drawings that are necessary and attending the information sessions, communicating to the public, et cetera. All of that will come into play on that. And a reminder to the public that that money to get to March has already been approved, right? So that was money that the voters have put into the capital reserve fund. We already have that. That comes off the bottom line. We're just, we pre-approved the expenditure of that. So, there was a question from somebody in the public about what was this authorized? And the answer is yes. The warrant article was really clear. It was about building a new school and what it takes to get that warrant article presented in March, and the money has been set aside by a majority of the public. So the board are agents to expend that, and it's aligned with the board's objectives to get this this project to fruition come March. And so I think we're right where we need to be, and everything is lined up nicely. Anything else for Kyle?
I have
Kyle?
a quick question.
Yeah.
We'd already put in an invoice because before we had the contract already resolved. Do I need to redo those, or are
I don't think so.
Okay,
Let's-
all right, good.
Corey, you don't need any re-invoicing, do you?
I wasn't sure because the contract having not been signed yet, that but this goes back to like April's work, so I just want to make sure it was covered.
I think we're all, Corey, you're
No, I
muted.
think we're square for now.
Okay, good. Thanks.
No additional.
Perfect. Anything else for Kyle on architect fees, or anything else from the public that we want to make sure we address? I mean, we're having a publicly broadcast meeting, so it's good to get it on record if we can. All right. So two other things on the GMS project. So let me talk about the land update. So as this committee knows, we've been negotiating for a piece of property. We thought we were making some headway, and then we had kind of a little setback. So right now we're waiting to see what the nature of the setback is, but it's didn't go the way I thought it was going to go, and so we're sort of in a little holding pattern, waiting to hear back. And because of the setback, it caused me to sort of, and consulting with our design team, to go back and say, well, what about a couple of other ideas that we had? So we had several working ideas, and then we put our eggs in one basket. And now we're saying, if that basket isn't where they should be, we need to have a backup plan. So we are trying to fall back on a couple of backup plans to make sure that we know exactly where to site the school. Because in Kyle's work, he has to site, he can't just draw a picture and not know where it's going. He's got to have site work that goes into it. And so we've authorized him to design to the site that we thought we were going to be able to go with. And so we saw some preliminary drawings on Monday. And honestly, they were beautiful. I mean, I was so impressed with the work the team did to bring this forward. But we can't share it publicly because it's not a real site yet. It's not anything that we have signed off on an agreement for. So Tina and Dan, you were in the meeting. I mean, thoughts from the work without getting into the specifics of it? I mean, were there reactions that you had to what we saw?
I will just say it renewed confidence that literally every detail was accounted for, and every, let me find the words. It made me, it renewed my faith in the team that they are taking our wishes and our needs and driving the process. Because there were aspects to the design that I had forgotten we'd even mentioned weeks ago that were integrated into this very preliminary plan. But so we have a team that listens and then takes that and applies it to the design. So it was a very good kind of, first, I don't want to use the wrong word, but rendering. I don't know if it's,
Sure.
Yeah, first rendering that gave me a high level of confidence for what's going to come when more specifics.
Good.
I agree with what Dan said, and I even some of the things that have been brought up at some of the community forums were included. Like the meetings that your team has had with the staff and the students, and a lot of that was able to incorporate. And I think the more participation and the more feedback that we get, I think it'll, as we fine tune, I think it's very exciting.
And the team recognized, even though this is like preliminary, that there's still work to be done to vet this with the public. So it's not like,
Right.
I mean, it's not rough ideas because it's beyond that. But they really have incorporated it in the first round, and then going back to the public and saying, here's where we are, give us more feedback, because it's not a done deal by any stretch. It's just sort of conceptually, we're on a really good pathway and journey. And I think Dan's right, and Kyle's the one who made the comment that, it's the ideas, but the ideas are really coming from all the conversation and all the dialogue. Kyle didn't dream up, this is what a school in Litchfield should look like. He's been listening to people in Litchfield. Yeah. And I just am so impressed with the team and what they put together. So.
Yeah, there was far more in the design that I've heard come up at the community forums, at the meetings with the various teachers, and with the students than ever came out of my mouth. Yeah.
Well, it feels really good to hear all this,
and I talk a lot.
This was the intent, that if we can get the community and the staff and the district as a whole to buy into this, it's going to help with the vote. And I think that, when you look at my team, they're experts in architecture, but they're not experts in Litchfield. So we need to listen to you folks, and that's what we're here to do.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that particular topic? So at what point do we want to share with the community and the public kind of that vision for community input and forums? I think we've all heard this. We've been talking about this, about the various organizations that we need to, that this group or the school board or whoever needs to have conversations with. So I think whether we're talking about veterans group, the 55 plus group, I think there's just a lot of groups in town that want to engage in conversations, and I think would be really good for the school board, the SAU, to have a very intentional plan on how they're going to have those conversations with those groups.
I think that's a great question. And honestly, if we had a purchase and sales on a piece of property, we'd be ready to start that level of engagement. We're sort of stuck because now we have a picture to a site that we don't technically own or know for sure that that's the site that it's going to be. So I think that's what's causing a little bit of a handcuff for us because, you can't get out over your skis on that one. So we need to make sure that we get that figured out and then go forward.
Yeah, that answers my question because that, at least from a timeline standpoint, we're looking for that piece to be complete before we start engaging in some of those public groups.
If we own the land, I would have asked Kyle tonight to present to this committee on TV what we had already done, and then I think we would have gone forward with and now give us feedback. We would have stuck them on the wall and had people giving us feedback by now, but we can't, and it's frustrating because we're just not getting where we are. We all know land in Southern New Hampshire. It's not an easy thing to work with. So,
Well, and there is a plan in place. Charlie Niebling's been working pretty hard on putting together a whole rollout time frame and who's assigned to what. He's pressuring us to produce some writing that he wants in the newsletter and that kind of stuff. So there is gears in the works to move that forward. And I know Suzanne's been working closely with Charlie and trying to pull those outreach pieces together. So as soon as we get the starting gun, we will be, there's a lot that will happen.
we had close to 300 people who signed up for the project specific newsletters, and that's with one communication, and it was 300 that signed up overnight almost. And
It's amazing.
Was that just for GMS?
well, it was GMS, LMS, and CHS. I have the specific breakdown. More people are interested in GMS than the other two, but and then most of those people, 90% of them said, and go ahead and share this with a third party. So as you know, the school district can't promote the project, but friends of a new GMS group can promote the project. And most people have said, send me the promotional stuff. So, so we'll be able to share that because they've opted into that. So I think we're on the right path. And Charlie's suggestion was that we get a newsletter out to all these people, like giving a status update next week. So we're working to get that done and produced and out. So it's coming.
One more question. I'm full of them today.
It's good.
Just because I've heard this on the side as well, and this may be more of a school board question, but when thinking about the land piece, when we get to that point, I've been asked specifically like voter approval and what that looks like. Is the intent or the thought process that is potentially a separate warrant article come March?
So I'll answer what I've shared with the board, and I think I did this in public session, which is that I would envision a warrant article to buy the land separate from the warrant article for the school.
Okay.
And here's the reason why. A land purchase is a majority vote.
Correct.
If you couple it into a bond vote, now you're at the supermajority threshold. And so you could end up with a no saying, well, let's take another year to tweak the design and to figure that out.
At least you can.
We still don't own the land, right? So I think a majority vote to say, we agree with you on the land, but then if we don't get the supermajority saying, and this is the right building and the right bond amount, at least we own the land and know where to go with it.
Fair.
So our intent is to come forward with one bond for the land. What's the worst case scenario? You can't buy the land.
You get the super majority on the bond, but not the simple majority on the land.
It would be the worst.
So that's a nightmare.
Can you make it hover?
That's right. The floating school.
On wheels.
Mobile school.
Surprised if it played out that way. Yeah.
But that's the short answer on where we think we're going. But obviously, I'm also going to say that is up to the school board in setting the
Right.
final warrant.
But the purchase of land does need to go before the voters, so that will have to be voted.
I think the spirit of that question was more to your answer of separate or combined.
And probably contingent. There will be some contingencies on.
Yeah, I think we'd have to
Right.
check with legal because Contingent on what though? On
Well,
the
I mean,
passing of
like
the building?
a purchase and sales on the land
Oh,
would be
oh.
contingent on voter approval. That
Absolutely.
kind of-
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Right,
no,
right,
that
correct.
has to be.
Yeah, that was brought up in the budget
It was,
committee
that did
meeting
come up
too.
in the budget committee. Yeah.
Yeah, because the purchase has to be approved by the voters by
Mhm.
RSA. So, so any purchase and sales would have to say contingent on a March vote.
I think what came out of that question, Tina, was would there be a special election? And
Right.
what I said is my exact response was I've heard no comments of a special election.
No,
I believe the intent to be it would be included in March, but I'm not going to speak for the school board.
right. We haven't voted on that, but I would agree that that is the current intent.
And I think legal would back you up on that. I think that they would say that you have to wait till next March, that this is not a
An emergency.
emergency that they would feel comfortable going forward to a court on. So I think because of that, the intent would be to wait until March and present it as one big package. Anything else on the land? So then the last thing is school funding. So we have an application due June 30th with the state of New Hampshire for building aid. Remember, that's a biennium. So you have to get this application submitted. That commits into the next budget biennium that starts with elections next year. So Kyle's team is working to get that done. And one of the hiccups that we're facing is the land question. So I had a great conversation. I haven't had a chance to talk to Kyle, but a great conversation with Amy Clark, who administers the program for the state of New Hampshire. And I said, Amy, here's the dilemma that we're in. What's your advice? I said, because it runs from, some people are thinking we can't even submit because we don't have the site. And some people are saying you got to submit. And Amy's advice was submit. And she said, here's the thing. If you've identified deficiencies at your current site, so the site is not adequate for an elementary school because, and you have things about traffic, you're going to get points for fixing the traffic thing. And so she said, you sort of want to design, you want to tell us how you're doing that so that we can award those points. But once the points are awarded, you can't then say, well, we couldn't get the land we wanted, so we're just going to build back on the old site because we got the points for being on the current site, right? Or going to a new site that makes an improvement. So she said, as long as you're not on that site, but the second site or third or fourth, wherever you land, has equal improvement so that the points that were awarded to you keep your overall ranking, you're fine. That's the key thing, is that, we're leaving this and we're scoring by moving to another site. And so as long as we continue to have a site that whatever we write about, so she said, if you overestimate, like this is the perfect site, and you overestimate to that, and the next site is pretty darn close to being perfect, but not as many points, that could become a question mark because you drop in the ranking. So does that make sense, Kyle, in your?
It makes a lot of sense. I was speaking with a colleague today. It's a little bit of honor among thieves. This other guy that's working on another application called me asking for advice, and we were helping each other out. And so I asked him, have you heard about other districts updating their application after submitting it? And he said, yes, that has happened in the past, and that there's kind of a feeling out there among the others that we could do that. So that made me feel a little more comfortable. I just heard that today, that if we do submit and then we have a site plan, we could do the bait and switch and get the site plan put in. And that goes along with what you just said that Amy said.
Yep. So it's all in the points, because remember, we're going to be ranked. And then I also asked her to give me a little more detail. So we submit this thing on June 30th, and then what?
Right.
And she said the state board will issue rankings in November, I think.
That's what I've heard.
And so at that point, it'll become kind of finalized, but you still won't know. Even in the March vote, we're not going to know if there's money attached to our ranking.
The budget gets signed
Yeah.
in June or July.
July.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and the last biennium, they didn't actually sign it until September. So nobody knew until September. Now they could just say, we're only funding the tail, and then nobody gets funded. Or they could, the tradition is to go for 50 million, which would leave about 20 for projects. Or I think the last biennium, they ended up approving an extra 15. So there was 65. So, it all depends on the legislators. And, we won't know until after, as you said, the bond vote.
But the fact that they're not even establishing the ranking until November, that it gives us time to really
Yes.
be sure about the site.
Yes.
And
Well, keep in mind, so their process is they're reviewing all these documents,
Right.
and so they'll review, a project in July, and then might not go back to it until November.
Yeah.
But they also meet as a committee to review all these things. So the cutoff might be really like September or October
Yeah.
for them to have enough time to really review the changes before the November final. So I wouldn't take too much time.
No,
if it goes
no,
too-
that's
too
not.
long. And the other thing too is that ranking that comes out. Let's say if Litchfield does not score well and is say fifth in line, and only the top three get funded, it doesn't mean that you're off the list. In fact, the next year's crop would go in behind you, but I don't know if you'd want to wait 2 years to get to that point. So it's not all for lost. And I think that's what Amy was getting at, is that even just applying, even if you score badly, you're still on the list.
I think, it's important. It'll be important to the voters that we've applied,
Mhm.
that we've given it our due diligence. We've said from the beginning that we don't anticipate ranking high enough to receive building aid, but let's hope we do. So, we should prepare to not get anything and then hope that something does come through. But even at the March vote, I think
But no, a ranking, but not anything else.
and we're going to say we're ranked number, and we'll have a number
Mhm.
at that point, and we can say here's where we fall, and this is what has happened historically. There might be a little bit of money, or there might be, it's highly unlikely that we'll ever see anything from the building aid process, or we can report something at that stage, but people are going to be voting based on a local tax impact and not dependent on.
I don't think that there's a requirement that they give all the money to the top ranking districts. It's possible that they could dole out smaller amounts to some of the lower ones.
That's exactly what I was going to ask. Like, have we approached any of our state legislatures or legislators about that right there? Like, I know that model has changed from the way it used to be to more of the way it is now. I've heard rumblings that it might shift back, but I've seen nothing concrete around that. Have we talked with anyone at the state level about could that formula and process change to better benefit us?
So we have not had a formal outreach to our legislators, but it might make sense to do that, and just so that they're aware.
The funding formula right now is state law, so the law would have to change in order to change that.
Right. That's why I was mentioning them, because they'd have to be involved in that. Yeah.
But I think that the committee that's reviewing these has some leeway as to who gets how much and why. Basically, there are certain funding caps within the law: square feet per student, cost per square foot, utilization rates. There's some things in there that they could look at and say, well, they're 20% over this number, so therefore we're going to give them 20% less. And I think it's possible that they could look at a set of applicants and say, all right, these three are pretty equal, so instead of giving just to one, we'll spread it out.
I think that's interesting that we wouldn't know in time for the March vote.
It's true. We won't.
Yeah.
And like I said, that's all predicated on the legislature actually doing their job in time, which that they have not historically always been able to do.
And do you know, does the funding formula come through budget and finance, or does it come through ed? Like, which
I believe
part of the legislature?
that the law for that, I think it's ED 320.
But it's an ED, so
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it's ED 3.
Sometimes it helps to know which representatives to kind of reach out based on
Yeah.
subcommittee assignment.
Gotcha. It's definitely ED. And the committee that reviews all this is basically Department of Education and Police.
Any other questions or comments or concerns about school funding? Did you have anything else under that?
Nope, I think that covers us.
Okay.
Anything else on GMS before we shift, or new elementary school before we shift?
Would
Dave?
it be helpful, going back to the fee, would it be helpful to do a fee comparison from the proposals we received from the other architects at this point? Or is it
I think it is helpful because I'll tell you, one of the things is in looking back, so go back to the original effort to replace, the fee from Harriman back in 2000 was 7%. That was, 7% of the cost of the school, right? So that, just to give everybody a sense of what he was operating under, okay? And then Dave, do you want to just talk a little bit about the types of range that we saw?
First of all, let me just say that RS Means is a database of construction costs, and they include architectural fees in their database, and their range is 4.9 to 16% of the cost of construction. The 16% fees are typically for smaller, more intense projects, more custom projects, and our fees are towards the lower range of that. We put out a request for qualifications, and we've received 4 proposals from 4 different architects, 3 of whom gave us a fee range as a percentage of the cost of construction, 1 of whom gave us a fee range for just the first phase schematic design. We made our decision of Barker Architects based on the fee and other considerations. Kyle has great experience with schools in New Hampshire. Kyle's been around this block many times. He knows all the players. He was also the lowest fee range. And I'll just go through these if that's appropriate. Kyle proposed a fee range of 5 to 7% of the cost of construction. McClay Simons proposed a fee range of 7 to 8% of the cost of construction. Marinase was 5 to 8%. And those were the 3 architects that we got the fee range from. Dennis Myers came in with $275,000 to $350,000 for schematic design only, and we're not sure how far that would have taken us. Kyle's original proposal, his schematic design was going to be 10% of the cost of construction, but as we got into it and figured out that we were going to need that schematic design to cover all the documentation necessary for the construction manager to get to a guaranteed maximum price, he went to 20% of the cost of 20% of the fee for his schematic design, which is, I don't know where Dennis Myers' fee was coming from, how far that would have covered us, if that would have gotten us to a GMP or not. But just that information is why we hired Barker Architects for this project.
That is
So-
helpful.
Pretty interesting that we all overlapped on 7%.
Yeah, exactly. And it overlaps back to the work 15 years ago. So,
Right.
it's really
Which wasn't net zero building.
correct.
So, add that in,
It's another layer.
providing a bit more service for the same price.
Correct. Yep. Anything else on GMS then? David, that's helpful. Thank you for. So let's shift over to project updates. So we'll start with LMS. Oh,
Goodbye.
Kyle, I think,
You don't need me for the,
I don't think so. Anything else for Kyle?
Thank you.
All
all right, I gotta go furniture shopping.
Thank you. Suzanne and Nicole, do you want to drop out of the meeting at this point? Kyle's leaving.
I believe we will. Thank you very much. Thanks so much.
Have a great afternoon. Thank you.
You too. Bye. You too.
So LMS phasing, and Dave, if you want to hop up here because it's fast and furious. And so I want everybody to understand what is going on. Basically, we're in the process right now of planning to empty out significant parts of the building so that they can begin demo work. As you know, school ends at noon or lunchtime on Thursday, the 16th. So students will go home at that point, and then teachers will be in the process of finishing up grades and everything they need to do that afternoon. Dave Ross is prepared to have a crew come in on the afternoon of the 16th to begin moving furniture out of the places in the building that we need to do. We'll have Friday the 17th as a work day to finalize some of that work. Excuse me. And then North Branch is going to arrive on site on Monday the 20th. And that's when they're going to start the work that they need to do. So they'll be beginning the demo work, and then it's going to very quickly progress. Dave, any general comments on that before I project the map and walk through that with everybody?
Yeah, no, that timing is right on.
So let me put up here
Close that door.
the current phasing map. Thank you for that.
Just
Thanks,
a
Steve.
note, that seems like a very quick turnaround for teachers to be, finishing up with students and then out of their rooms or ready for their rooms to be taken over that same afternoon. Are they allowed to work during their planning prep periods
Absolutely.
to start packing up while
So-
students are still there?
Jen is communicating this with staff and kind of explaining some of the preliminary phases. And they've done a couple of exercises we brought some extra 30-yard dumpsters in because there's a lot of stuff that just needs to be weeded out and brought to the dumpster. There are some storage Connex containers on site ready to receive material that can be boxed up and packaged and stored. So those have already arrived. So we're mobilizing. All of this is known and people are aware of the steps on it. I think some of the particulars on this plan are being discussed with staff this week. So I think they're getting their first glimpse at what it is that we believe we're going to be able to do.
Sorry to interrupt.
So the general concept here, I'm going to minimize this if I can. Maybe that's as minimal as it gets. Sorry. The general concept is that the mechanical room is in that back upper corner, right? So this is where the receiving and the boilers and everything is located. So you sort of have to work your way back toward that corner as you decommission features of the building. You can't shut the heat off by working in that area and disconnecting it to everywhere else. So you're kind of working your way back. What Joe has put forth, Joe being North Branch Construction, is that the first area they're going to hit is the classrooms that surround the courtyard. And so this area in green is what they envision hitting first. And basically the demo work is going to consist of taking down the ceiling grid, and that will, the lighting and so forth will all come down. And so that'll expose the ductwork and let them see the exact layout of the pipes, so that they can then begin that demo work and making sure that they are working their way back. So if you have a heating loop, you can't just sever it in the middle. You got to have a plan on how you're going to continue the loop to keep the classrooms heated that need to be heated, which is basically the white area of the building is what won't be touched this summer. You'll also notice that the gym is scheduled to be done. And the gym, that includes the locker room renovation and the 2 new classrooms, will be accomplished in the second part of the project. Notice that we put the main office in blue also here because that's done. That was accomplished last year. So on the first diagram, it was showing as white. And I said, no, it's done. Put a color to it because we're not touching that area. And it looks better if we know that that's been accomplished. And then the other areas that are marked in brown or orange over here are the cafeteria and the music rooms. And that's sort of the third phase. And that gets a little bit more nuanced. So basically the cafeteria can be done. The kitchen is the thing that's sort of causing the problem at this point because commercial kitchen equipment is many months delayed due to the supply chain issues. So they're going to be able to do elements of it, but not everything. And it may be put off. I mean, David, am I correct? Some of this may not even be until, we're hoping maybe December, but it might even be next summer that it finally gets done just because of when we get our hands on stuff.
Exactly right.
So the cooler will be in place outside. That is scheduled to come in August. That'll be put on the slab. That'll become available to us. And then there can be some selective work done inside the kitchen. But the heating ventilation area in the cafeteria, this is the stage, even though it's marked music M50, that's the stage area. And then the music room was sort of partially done last summer. So it's like the heating and cooling side is accomplished, but now we need to hit the ventilation side. So the fresh air side will have to be done this summer. And the goal is that when we open in August, everything that is done in color here, so green, blue, and brown, and maybe, notice he has it labeled as the possible fourth area. And this doesn't really impact, but it's the hallway and the bathrooms. And so they're hoping that they can also have that done before school opens. So let me just pause for a second, because that was way more than what we thought we were going to be able to do. And I just want people to digest that and see what questions or observations you might have on it. And then we'll talk through the then what. So picture that all of that is done, buttoned up, and in place when we open school in August.
Was there a conversation? I don't remember where. I remember us talking about the library possibly being done this summer as part of either the pink or, as a possible fifth phase.
I pushed Joe to try to get him to commit to the library, and he just couldn't. And part of it is, so just like Kyle has the thick plans, there's so much behind this simple map.
Sure.
And so how everything comes together, he just wasn't confident that the library could be done because of where the heating is and which ventilation units that's on. So it's got to be incorporated into the work that sort of surround it and not just isolated. So unfortunately, that was a no.
So if I'm kind of being a little simplistic here, but if all of the colored areas are potentially finished this summer, that leaves the white areas then for going into the school year.
So that is what we're calling occupied mode, because school opens, we have students and staff in there teaching and learning, and that's the part of the building that still needs to be renovated as while in occupied mode.
Okay.
And so remember, we had a proposal. We still have a proposal. If we need to relocate a grade to the high school, we can do that. And you can see that, you can imagine that taking 4 or 5 of those classrooms right off the grid and saying we don't need them because the students are learning at CHS, that would alleviate what occupied mode looks like. None of us will like that, but that's one of the options that would exist for us. The other thing that Jen is sort of trying to do is to reimagine how to use the space that she would have. So we're kind of optimistic that we get these 2 new classrooms out of the locker room, right? So that's additional space that can be used. She's looking at the art classroom, and room 18 was actually one of the 8th grade classes, or 5th, 7th grade class, I'm not sure, that is not used next year. So she's like, well, there's 4 extra spaces, if you would. And she's thinking that spaces like room 10, which is currently the fax classroom, that is something that could be flexible and taught in available space. She's also looking at rooms 12 and 7 and room 3, saying, oh, because 3 is the other, I think 3 is the 8th grade class that got collapsed. So the 5th, 8th grade class. So those spaces become available to us to think differently about. And so it will involve some people being teaching on a cart or having to go to various rooms that are available in order to teach. But those are all possibilities that come.
Is room 17, is that the art room?
17 is the art room. So you could put a class in there and then teach art in whatever space is available. So, again, ideal? No. But how does that measure up against the idea of moving 8th graders? Maybe that's something that's more desirable and we can make work.
Well, and so, I certainly have no idea, but 17, at least on the map, looks huge.
Yeah.
Is it possible to put 2 classrooms in there, a divider, which I know in the gym, echoey isn't ideal, but maybe in a classroom setting on a temporary basis, 17 just looks really big to me. I don't know if it's just out of proportion on the map, but
Sinks in the corner.
Well, it's got the,
Usually have a lot of built-in.
there's a storage room and a kiln room carved out of it, if you look.
okay.
And you also have the built-in
Tables.
cabinets and so forth. So the other thing that's weird about 17 is you have a wasted entryway into the room. So if you look at kind of the door comes off the corridor, but you can't really do anything in that tiny little 10 by 10 space. So it just ends up being like an entryway to the art room. it's great to display art. It's great
Sure.
to welcome the kids in with a warm environment, but it's not functional teaching space. So, but if you were displaced out of a science room and
You could use
you had
the
a
art
room like that, yeah, so that could become
Mm.
a temporary science location with
Yeah.
sinks and so forth. So,
Right.
you see how that opens up possibilities.
Sure.
But still, you're talking about having 375 students or so in an occupied building versus if we moved, 87 of them over to the high school. It's less planning and more options. So that's why we're trying to weigh all this out and to find the best path going forward.
That's impressive. That's good news.
How long
I
for
think
the white? Is the white still anticipated to be through March or April or through the school year? Or since the phasing is more aggressive now in terms of what's going to get done over the summer, that might be pushed up a little bit too. I mean, I understand the kitchen, we're at the mercy of the supply chain issues, but potentially is the white going to be completed any quicker?
Dave, what's your sense? I have an answer, but I'm curious what you have heard.
As far as timing for the white areas,
Yeah.
I would anticipate February or March would be our completion date. When we first spoke with Joe Campbell at North Branch, or when we've been speaking with him, he's been talking about 9 to 10 months of duration for this project, and that would bring us to February or March for that week.
So the ability to gut out everything in green in an unoccupied building is very different than doing all the white. So in the white, I think you're looking at like the library 12 and 7 as a chunk, maybe 11 and 8, So you're going to be in much smaller chunks of what you do in order to schedule and work your way back toward that boiler room. So
With the struggles with the supply chain, do they have everything already on order to do everything that's colored? I live in the world of construction, so that's why I'm pretty concerned that that's a lot of work to get done in 2.5 months if everything's not on order. And I don't know how big the mechanical systems are, what you're doing and so forth. I'm sure there's substantial lighting that's being ordered.
We're all concerned about supply chain issues. That said, everything's been ordered already, and Joe pretty much knows what the lead times are on everything. So he's got a good handle on just what is coming now and what is problematic. Probably the most problematic items that we're finding right now are things like electrical panel boards. They could be 6 months to a year out.
100%.
So those are the most problematic. But as far as the mechanical units, I think most of them are on order and have a reasonable lead time to them based on our timing, because we've known about this far enough in advance that he's been able to put them on order, or at least on hold, let them know that they're coming. So when we were able to release the funds, he was able to make the order and get things into the works so that we can hopefully avoid some of these supply chain issues. That's not to say that they won't come up, because I've seen it on other projects where they say, yes, we've got this Mitsubishi unit, it's going to be shipped next week, and 2 months later, we're still waiting for it. So those issues do come up. However, I have a lot of faith and confidence, having worked with North Branch on this project for the past year now, over a year, that when they say that they have a good handle on what's coming, I pretty much believe them. So, but some of it's not within their control. So.
And honestly, Steve, Joe surprised me when he put this map in front of us. So he had prepared us for way worse.
It seems really aggressive to me, living in it every single day and what I see going and the amount of work. And my head goes into what's going in there.
But he did not put a map in front of us until he had met with all the subs.
That's good.
And, got assurances, to Dave's point, that the orders were in, that the delivery dates were thus and such.
You're still at the mercy of the supplier, though, because most of my problem, and I'm a supplier, I sit there and say, yep, these are the dates it's coming. I go into the system, it's pushed out a month. And it's an everyday occurrence. So that's why I just thought it was very aggressive. Not to be Debbie the Downer, just
but
real world part of it.
But this is why it's important that I think people understand, we're going to do our best to have grades 5 through 8 at the middle school. But let's just say it's August 24th and we're saying, holy smokes, we thought this, but here are the things we encountered along the way. We have to have a contingency plan now. We don't sit there and say, well, what are we doing next week? Like we did with COVID. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to have a really well thought out plan and know exactly how we're going to do this. And that's why we put forward the 8th grade proposal, because that's just something we may need to have. We'd like to not have to do it, but.
And I think the frequent updates and making sure, any changes are communicated out to parents and families is going to be key. And wherever we end up come late August.
But I think people need to understand, and I think they're trying to, and they want to, but that you don't know. I mean, there's some elements that we can't control, so we can say it doesn't look like we're going to need it, but it may have to happen. And so that flexibility, is key on everybody's parts.
I think one other thing that we have to keep in mind is the fact that this is more than a 3-month project, even if there were no supply chain issues.
Sure.
Okay.
Definitely.
This is more work than can be done, even with the large crews that they're throwing at this. This is more than can be done in the 3 months that the school is out of session.
Well, and the way I've explained it to when we had the 8th grade parent night, although it was more than 8th grade parents who attended, but I said originally we were going to start right after April vacation, and we said we were going to go to October. We always had our hands that far apart. And then what happened was April didn't happen because of supply chain. So the whole project did this. And I don't want to hit you, but it did this too, because it expanded into the supply chain thing. So we really, these are just the nature of what we've been subjected to. It's not what we ever envisioned. It's not what we said in February at deliberative. It's not what we committed to, but we also said supply chain then, because we knew there were things that were potentially coming down the pipe at us. So, if it helps the public to know, we continue to have a standing meeting on Tuesday where the design team gets together and we problem solve. It's like, what are we seeing? What are we hearing? And that's our time to sort of figure it out. And then starting next week, we have an on-site meeting every Wednesday where concerns from the design team go to the field, and we'll be right there with the construction superintendent and just all the people to make sure that we understand exactly what is happening too. So it's twice a week that we meet, and that's the formal meetings. There are a few phone calls and emails that occur outside of that, but we are right on top of doing our best to deliver this project.
Just a clarification, I think next week's meeting is Thursday instead of Wednesday because the school is occupied with graduation on Wednesday. Am I correct about that?
I think you are right, David. Thank
And then going forward from there, it's every Wednesday.
The only other thing I would suggest or say is, to the extent that in terms of parent expectations, maybe setting a monthly email either from you or from Jen that says, here's your construction update for June. Here's your construction update for July. And again, not necessarily too frequent, but when it looks like maybe you may fall off this phasing a tiny bit, people can know and say, okay, well, in August, we told you August 1st update, here's where we were running into some issues.
So back to that parent sign up.
Yeah.
And we're going to continue to promote for people to sign up for that info. Good luck, Coach. But we'll make sure that we get that word out so that people can sign up for those.
I got to go get my kid. She's sitting outside right now. I told her I'd be there at 4:30. Don't worry. Sorry, Grace.
It's not good luck, Coach. What is
I'm
it?
sure she's
Good luck,
watching.
Mike. Good luck,
Him and I
Coach.
were supposed to leave together, and we both were looking at each other.
Sorry.
All right. But thank you for answering my question.
You're welcome. Anything else on LMS phasing that would be important for people to understand? Oh, and I'm sorry, Charlie's emails. So Dan, Jen, and I are going to meet tomorrow after admin. Dan, you didn't know this, but just make sure that we have a similar format, because I think the project updates should, as they come out, they should look coordinated. So we're going to make sure that we have a format. We know what we're answering, and we're going to start to press that out. Monthly updates are at a minimum, especially at LMS, because that's going to go very quickly here.
Yeah. And I've been tasked by Charlie to write, so I'll be doing that tonight, a initial message that hopefully, he said, in less than 200 words, get everyone up to speed to where we're at today. So gonna shoot for 350.
And then I get final edit, don't I? So I'll
I
get you
guess,
down
yeah.
to 200.
Less than 200. That's like a tweet.
Being succinct in my writing is not one of my strong suits.
Yep, it's words, not characters, right? So it's not a tweet. All right. Anything else on the LMS? And so just a reminder that the school is not used over the summer. Extended school year programs have all been located at the high school. Parents, if you go down there, there'll be, warning signs, no trespassing, all that stuff like there was last year. So there's not going to be a lot to see down there as an active site. The school will be open. They'll be operating out of the office because that area is done during the day, but really otherwise there's no need for people to be down there. So, all right. CHS Lighting. So let me just give the committee a quick update on where we are with CHS Lighting.
Right.
It's very bright. So basically the fixtures are all in. They were in the building last night installing the dimmer switches. And so each classroom now has a dimmer switch. It's not operable yet, but it will be shortly. So that teachers will be able to select between a couple of preset settings in the classroom. The feedback from high school students and staff who work there, including in our office, is that it is very bright because the LED lights are operating at 100%. They are on. They connected them and they're on full bore. Once this work is done, we're going to set a cap as to what the light volume is, luminosity, I guess. And that'll be set back to maybe 70%, 80% of the full on. And so the brightness problems will pretty much go away once that is set. And then teachers and staff will have a dimmer switch. So even if that is too much, they'll be able to make an adjustment in their own workspace to scale back on the amount of light. So the other thing is that these are very smart lights. So they will do things like, I'm sitting here near the window, and that is just full bore bright. These lights would actually be less bright because they would be sensing that the window is providing natural light. So you would have more light artificially toward the rear of the room and less by the windows with the design of this. So, and then they have occupancy sensors also. So if the room is empty and somebody left the lights on, they'll just go off, they'll dim. And so all of these things are really going to result in pretty decent energy savings for us. So we're looking forward to seeing where that lands on the scale. So that's our lighting update. Questions? Everything will be, I believe, done next week. So we will meet the deadline for the seed grant. And then a reminder that this whole project is covered by seed grant and impact fees. So there's no impact to the taxpayers because the impact fees are funding the majority of it with rebates from Eversource and the seed grant providing the rest of the money. So. All right. Any other project updates? Did I miss anything in that? So I guess we're at member input.
It's time.
A lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Our next meeting is scheduled for the 22nd, 3:30 to 5:30. It's 2 weeks out, and we'll know even more about all of these projects at that time. So we'll just keep giving updates. And if there's something that comes up in the interim or, somebody hears something, send it off to Tina or me, and we'll get it on the agenda and have a game plan.
Sounds good.
All right. Great. So do we need a formal vote to adjourn?
I'll
or-
make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 0-0. Meeting is adjourned.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.